Finding those elusive 10 to 100x gains in this market can be quite a challenge. So I thought as we end the year off, why not give you some of the skills and the tools that have helped me navigate this market in what I believe quite an effective way over the past few years. So, hey guys, Sheldon Evans here. Welcome back. If you're new here, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on all of those bell notifications. On my display right now, I have CoinGecko open, and amongst the 12,118 coins we have listed here, it can be quite difficult trying to identify where to allocate your capital. So how do you figure out which coin to put your money in? How do you figure out where the market is moving? And how do you predict the future? And the simple answer is you don't. You don't try and guess. You don't try and figure out what is going to happen before it happens. You simply move with the market. I get so many messages from people asking me, hey Sheldon, what do you think of this coin? Is this this project? Or, hey Sheldon, do you see this project? I think this is going to do 100x in the next few days, or in the next few months, or in the next few weeks. That doesn't matter. Trying to predict what is going to happen in the market is a fool's game. Don't try and do this. You simply have to look at what we're looking at in the market right now and move with the flow. Now, I've spoken about this in previous videos, actually in a very recent video, as to judging market sentiment. And there's a few things you can use for this. You can use the Crypto Fear and Greed Index. You can use the Twitter feed. You can follow influential people in the space and simply get a conglomerate or a mixture of ideas and sentiment from a variety of sources to try and figure out where the market is moving. But this can be quite confusing, and it can be quite a challenge trying to then allocate your capital, especially if you don't have a lot of capital to throw at a bunch of different things. So the best thing you can do is simply try and identify the narrative while the current narrative is taking place. Now, let me give you an example of this. A few months ago in the market, there was this huge L1 boom, and it took place very shortly after Binance Coin started exploding. And the reason that this happened is Binance Coin did start exploding because the fees were much cheaper on the Binance Smart Chain than on Ethereum, and it made it a lot more accessible to more people in the market trying to navigate DeFi and crypto and DEXs and so on that were simply outpriced by Ethereum, so it provided an opportunity there. Then what took place after that? Then the other coins started popping off. Solana, Cardano, Polkadot, Avalanche. Why did these start popping off? Well, they had a test. They had something to go by. They had the big brother coin, firstly Ethereum, then they had Binance Smart Chain. And everybody thought, well, if everybody simply abandoned Ethereum and went over to Binance Smart Chain because it was cheaper, faster, and easier to use, then of course they would do that on Avalanche. Of course they would do that on Solana. And that is exactly what they did, but not to the same extent that they did on Binance Smart Chain. And the reason being is that we have to identify who is backing the project and where the narrative is being pushed by those in power. Now, as much as we like to believe that this market is decentralized, we have to truly understand that decentralization at a very base technical level sure may be the case across many of these chains. Bitcoin is decentralized in terms of mining, Ethereum is decentralized in terms of allocation and mining, but when it comes to figureheads, when it comes to sentiment and driving the market narrative, that can be a very singular, centralized point that can help you determine where the narrative is going. An example of this is Cardano. If we think a few months back, Cardano was all the rage. Everybody was investing in Cardano. Charles Hoskinson was our savior. And most people were speaking in this way and talking about how this is going to be the absolute #1 coin. It's going to kill Ethereum. And it's a very similar narrative to what we had in 2017, where all of these Ethereum killers were popping up and they were definitely going to destroy Ethereum because no one wants to use it. And these are faster, better, more decentralized, and stronger. But that wasn't the case. We noticed that sentiment slowly changed over time after Cardano did its 100x from 2 cents all the way up to $3. So we saw that sentiment change. Of course, there were many people that made astronomical gains in that coin, but as the sentiment changed, why? Because the gains were slowly getting diminished. When we went from $1 to $2, from $2 to $2.50, the gains aren't quite as exciting from $2 cents to $2. So what does that do? It changes the community sentiment. It changes how maximalist or how determined the community is to make sure that this project succeeds, because they're not incentivized to do so, because the gains just aren't there anymore. And we notice this across projects. As soon as the gains, or at least the potential for gains, start dying off, we notice the sentiment shift in those projects, especially the ones that are incredibly narrative driven. Now, Cardano is one of those projects that is very narrative driven because there's a lot of promises in this project. And I'm not hating on Cardano. I think there's room for all of these changes to exist. Please remember that. I'm not hating on any of these projects. I'm not simply abandoning them because I've made my money and so on. I'm giving you a clear, honest representation of the market and an explanation of how I've seen the market move over the past year. And navigating this market can be very much a mental and psychological game, much more than a technical trading game. And identifying these narratives, for example, when people started shifting out of Cardano and it started not making these gains, and we would make jokes about Cardano being our favorite stablecoin, simply trending at around $1. Then we had a pump, and now it's back down to $1.30-ish, and it's been trending at this level for a while. So what happens? People get frustrated, they get angry, they get annoyed that they're not making gains while the rest of the market may be pumping, or coins that they should have invested in or that they wished they invested in are in fact pumping. Now, trying to identify these narratives can be quite difficult. And often when you do come across them, we see people tweeting about them, we see people talking about them on Twitter. Perhaps we're too late. Perhaps we're too late at that point. So what do? You sort of ignore it. You abandon that project because you think, okay, I've missed the pump. It's too late for me to get in. Or you see a lot of people talking about it and you think, okay, everybody's talking about it already. And you start researching it. And you really get really deep into this project, and you sort of get these blinders on like a horse, and you look at this project, you dive really deep into it, and it blows your mind, and you think this project is game changing. It's going to change the world. I'm 100% going all in on this thing because I know that this is the future. How can it not be? It has IBC, it has interchain compatibility, and I'm just using Cosmos as an example here. It has whatever else. It scrubs your dog's feet, whatever coin it is. Whatever you find out about that coin, you're diving deep into it. And you become very much of what we call a maximalist, which is what is very hated amongst the community, in my opinion, because you are very focused and very blinded by this one project because you haven't looked outside of those blinders at other projects to see what people are building and actively working on. And we can use this as an example in terms of the developer community, right? We'll have a new project pop up. Let's call it, I don't want to make a coin up in case people start buying it. Let's call it Paper Trash Dog Coin. And people start looking at this coin and they see that, wow, look, it's perfect for developers. People are investing in it. It works. It does this better than this project. It does this 100 times faster. It does this in a more decentralized way. And you can't think of anything else because you can't fault it. And it just looks perfect to you. So you look at this project and you don't look anywhere else because they've told you that everything that happens in this project is better than everywhere else. And you sort of become indoctrinated by that single project. And you don't have this broad market view of all the other coins that perhaps are doing things maybe in a less efficient way, although they have adoption, they have network effect, they have people actively building on those chains, they have people actively working on those things and investing in those chains. That is what you should be focusing on, not what you're being told, but what is actually happening in the ecosystem. If people are actually building, if people are actually developing, are people actually using the DeFi ecosystem? Are people actually selling and trading high-valued NFTs on this platform? Ethereum, for example. That is what you should be looking at, not what you've been told, what you've read in the white paper. Even though I do encourage you to read the white paper to understand at least some of the tech behind the project you're invested in, you need to understand the tech behind a variety of projects. You need to understand the sentiment behind a variety of projects. And then out of those huge variety of projects, after looking at a lot of different things, that is when you can make your decision to, okay, I'm going to allocate capital to this project, and this project, because they do these things great, better than other projects, and perhaps there is some adoption and there are people actively working and building in these ecosystems. But if somebody tells you that this is going to be the next big thing because it will attract developers or because retail investors will like it or because whatever, insert reason here, then you're buying into a promise. You're buying into something that hasn't actually happened yet. You don't actually know what is about to happen, especially if you're new to this market and if you're new to cryptocurrency and you're new to NFTs and you're new to this entire ecosystem. There have been builders who have been here for many, many years, way longer than I have, in fact, way longer than 2016 before. People have been here much longer than me. I've only been here for a couple of years, right? And I've only actively been creating content in this industry for a few years. So there are people who know things way better than I do. There are people that are way more educated than I am. But I'm still at an advantage because I've been here for a while and I've been looking at these things and navigating the markets for a while. But if you come into the industry and you come into cryptocurrency and you don't actually know what has happened before, you don't actually know what people are building or working on, you simply go by what you've read, by the news, by what people are saying on Twitter, then it's way more easy for you to, that's not a perfect phrasing there, it's way easier for you to get fooled by the market and sort of buy into these hype narratives without actually understanding what is going on behind the scenes. So what I want you to do now is, when you're looking for something to allocate your capital to, look at what is first initialized or catalyzed that growth in that project or that coin, and then look at what other projects are similar to that and what has happened in the past to those. An example is oracles. So Chainlink and oracles were big hype back earlier this year. Everyone was talking about Chainlink being the next big thing. And of course it was the big coin. It was the best oracle, and it is still at this point one of the leading oracles, right? But tons of other oracles came around and they were doing things better than Chainlink, doing things faster than Chainlink. And at the time I even spoke about these coins and they did make significant gains, but they didn't necessarily overtake Chainlink. And this is where we come to taking profits. When is the best time to take profits? Do you take profits at the top? Do you take it when it overtakes the major project? So let's take a look at, this is not in the Cardano. Okay, well, I suppose. When do you take profits in things? When do you exit the market? Well, if your coin has done a 5x, but it hasn't overtaken Chainlink, even though it promises everything better than Chainlink, take your money and run. Leave the market. You're looking for those 100x gains. Move over to something else. Look where the narrative is shifting. If you have those blinders on and you're only focusing on your coin, you forget what else is happening outside of your blinders, and you're not able to navigate the market and shift over to those things instead, because you're only looking at the project that you're invested in, because you're incentivized to do that. You have money allocated to that project already. You're looking at that and you're just hoping everything works perfectly fine in that ecosystem without seeing what's going on behind the scenes or outside of that ecosystem. And this happened very much between DeFi 1.0 and DeFi 2.0. Sushi is what we would define as a DeFi 1.0 coin. The major DeFi summer, Sushi pumped like crazy, but it hasn't really recovered to that point. Why? Because better alternatives have come out. The second wave of DeFi is completely different this time around. People are allocating capital to things like Avalanche and then Terra Luna and so on, where DeFi is a lot easier to navigate for the regular user. They have real world apps that people are buying and using. So figuring out where that narrative has shifted because you were only looking at Sushi can leave you in the dust while you're holding onto coins while the narrative has completely moved past you and you're sitting there in your little bubble forgetting about what else is happening around you. I know I've been rambling a lot here, but hopefully a lot of this information sticks, because I do believe that it is valuable in the current state of the market. And if you've made it this far yet already, please don't forget to give it a like, and maybe I'll just make an announcement that, don't forget, I still have a $50,000 giveaway running on Twitter. We did extend the timeline too much by mistake, so we've shortened that. We've extended it just by 1 week to get a few more people into the giveaway. So if you haven't yet, go ahead and enter the giveaway. It is on my Twitter page at Sheldon Evans. Please make sure that you use the correct one and not a fake one. And I will never DM you. And anyone who asks you to DM them that is pretending to be me is pretending to be me. So back to the video, talking about identifying where the narrative is going is very important by keeping your eyes outside of the only thing or the things that you're invested in. Now, you might tell me, I don't have the time to do this. I've got a few messages from people saying that's a very privileged position to be in, is by looking outside of what you're doing and having time to research these things and understand the tech and invest in the market. Well, I think that's a bad excuse, firstly, because if you are investing especially a significant amount of your capital into this market, you should allocate the same amount of time to understanding that market. But with that aside, if you don't have the time, or you believe that you truly don't have the time to understand this, where do you turn? Well, you turn to Twitter, you turn to influencers, you turn to YouTube video makers and creators and so on, and you try and get an opinion in a short amount of time, and that is where you acquire your knowledge from. Now, I don't think this is the best strategy, even though, of course, I am speaking to you right now and you're getting this information from me, but it is a strategy that is efficient and allows you to get a lot of information in a very short amount of time in perhaps an easy to digest way. Now, it's fine in doing that. It's fine in figuring out what other people are saying and looking at these influencers and crypto YouTubers and Twitter influencers and whatever, and trying to understand what's happening with the market. But in doing so, you have to also understand the incentives behind those people and behind the people that you're listening to. Are they incentivized to talk about something? Are they incentivized to promote a project? Either because they're a seed investor, either because they've been paid to do so, either because they simply have bought in before you. These are all the things that take place online, and you have to understand this, that there's an incentive for people to talk about certain things in a certain way. And now, it's perfectly fine if those incentives are laid out on the table before that happens. So let's say I'm talking about a coin and I was paid to promote it. I would have to tell you that I've been paid to promote that coin and I'm invested in it. Or if I'm invested in a coin, I would tell you that I'm invested in that coin, and then I would talk about it. Now, as I've said many times on this channel, I've never been paid. I don't get paid to promote any coins. I don't get paid to do any of this. And there's nothing wrong with that either. I understand that it's a very lucrative business and a lot of people make an income doing that. But in doing so, you as the viewer need to understand the incentive behind that, or as the reader on Twitter or whoever, you have to understand where that incentive is coming from. Why are these people talking about it? Are they talking about it because they truly do believe that that is a fantastic project and that's going to change the world? And maybe they do. Or are they invested and they're looking for a short-term financial gain and that's the incentive? Also fine, but you need to understand that that is what is happening behind the scenes. So trying to understand not just the narrative that is actually happening, where people are actually moving around, moving their coins around, trading on different platforms, trading on different networks, trading on different exchanges, and trading across these chains. Look at what narrative is also being fed to you, because it is very easy, especially in the current state of the market. It was a lot easier a few years ago when the market was much smaller, but changing the narrative and shifting the narrative can happen very, very quickly because the incentive to do that is high. If somebody is feeding your narrative, let's say we want DAI because it's a stable coin, nothing's going to happen to it. Let's say DAI does something fantastic, amazing, and everybody starts talking about it. One YouTuber makes a video, people start talking about it on Twitter, other YouTubers pick it up. That narrative can shift very, very quickly, and the sort of market view can be that, oh, DAI, of course, DAI is going to be the next big thing, everybody's buying into it, I'm buying in. And therefore the narrative of that item changes, causes a catalyst for growth, that coin increases in value, people FOMO in because they haven't looked at all the other information, they just see the price going up, they enter into that coin, they get wrecked. All the other people who have been early on the narrative dump on them and they run away happy, while the people who got in last didn't have time to understand the narrative, just saw number go up, enter the market and get absolutely ruined. So essentially what I'm saying is look at the narrative, not just where you're looking, look outside of your bubble, try and understand a little bit of what's going on, and then think of the incentives behind that narrative. Now, one of the coins that I've spoken about as an example is Cosmos. Let's talk about timing these narratives now. Now, Cosmos, Atom, and Luna are two ecosystems that I've been incredibly bullish on for a very, very long period of time, for good reason, in my opinion. I think it's a fantastic product. I think we're in a multi-chain, inter-chain future where there'll be thousands of blockchains, all of them doing their own individual thing, thousands of cryptos, everybody for their own use case. Think of the world and the continents. And in those continents, we have countries, and within those countries, we have states and provinces, and within those, we have little cities, towns, and roads and buildings. That is essentially what Cosmos is. We have this world of different chains, and they're all doing their little own things, but they're all functioning together and connecting and communicating with one another, very much like the internet. That's why they call it the internet of blockchains. Now, I've been very bullish on this project for a while for that exact reason. I do believe that it is going to be one of the main, or is, even at this point, one of the main connectors of all the chains, so there has to have value there. It has to have some sort of value, right? And I was very, very early on this. I was speaking about this many, many months ago, right? And it didn't really do much for a very long period of time. It didn't really do anything. So people got frustrated. They were like, this coin's not pumping. Why is it not pumping? I'm not using it. What is it for? So people abandoned it. It doesn't really have this figurehead. It doesn't have a leader either. It doesn't have the one person behind Atom that's pushing it or choosing this narrative and talking about how there's maximalists behind this coin. There really isn't that, because there can't be, because it's an interchain blockchain. It's an interchain project. So what catalyzes the growth? Well, price. So when the price starts going up, that's when people start talking about it. Oh yes, Atom's going up. Everybody starts talking about it, buying, and that's when it pumps. But then it dumps very, very shortly after that. We did, of course, have the major crash in May, and it got absolutely destroyed. It went down to $9, I think, from like 30 at the time, $30. So we got like a 60% crash back in May. And people thought that was the end of Atom, of course, is going away. And I said, no, I'm absolutely buying at this point. I think Atom is the future. I've spoken about it in my private community. I said, this is a fantastic project. And people bought into it. And the thing is, with being early, you can also seem as if you're wrong. So the people who were buying it around here at 260 and months later it was at 250 or whatever, you might think you're wrong. You might think you missed the narrative. You might think you missed the project. But in fact, you were just early, just very, very early to this. And while that can be good, it can also be very, very frustrating. So I want to highlight a bit of information here from Lego Makers on Twitter, and he highlighted an extract from Arthur Hayes, and it says, "The difference between a trader and a truly prescient investor is having the courage to let your winners run until you reach the logical conclusion of the investing thesis that prompted the initial investment. That requires not just technical trading acumen, but a macro belief in a theme or regime that powers the asset's long-term returns." And this is an example with Cosmos. I believe in the long-term vision of Cosmos. I do believe that it is going to be the underlying connector of all the blockchains with IBC and so on, and I think it's a fantastic project. Therefore, my thesis has not changed on Cosmos since the very, very first time I invested in it. Nothing has changed. So I have no incentive to sell. I only have an incentive to hold because I'm not looking to allocate this capital anywhere else. I don't need it for anything else. I've accurately and efficiently allocated my capital in a way that I don't need it if the market crashes. I don't need it if the market pumps. I can simply let it sit, leave it, and come back to it years later until I'm presented with new information that changes my thesis, my original investment thesis. It's perfectly fine as well, as I've spoken many times before, to divorce bags and leave crypto coins behind that change. When new information is presented to you that changes your original thesis on that coin, dump it, leave it, forget that project in the dust, don't look back, and move on to something new. And this can happen for a variety of reasons. If the project founders aren't performing, if the project is not doing what it's meant to do, if they're delaying on communication, if there's all of these things that can happen that lead to a project's demise over time and sort of death of a community and death of the project. So if any of these things change over time, then maybe reconsider your investment thesis. But if the fundamentals and the understanding of the project and what you originally invested for has not changed, what are you looking to sell for? Why are you looking to exit the market? I think we truly have entered a stage in the market where we might have what some might call a super cycle, maybe not into the same extent that most people believe where we just go up and to the right forever, but where we have smaller or shorter cycles of peaks and troughs, and we do sort of have the steady growth as more institutions and mass adoption happens over time and people enter the market over a longer period of time. So as long as your investment thesis hasn't changed since the first time you invested, keep holding, extend that timeline, keep that timeline going, or your time horizon. I've said this many times when people are looking for short-term pumps. If the market is not performing in the time that you have defined for it to perform, then how can you expect any different? You have come to a conclusion that the market has to do so-and-so by a certain date out of the information you've presented, and because it doesn't do that, you think you're wrong. But that is not the case at all, and that's why I say when people are predicting 100k Bitcoin by said date or $1,000 Ethereum by said date, these predictions by certain dates are useless. They don't really matter because it just means that you've fabricated this time horizon in your head and you're hoping that the market performs in a certain period of time by that without understanding all of the thousands of variables and macro variables that go into moving the market and moving these certain coins, things that you cannot analyze as just a human being. You might need additional tools, and that's what fund managers and institutions at this point have. They are more sophisticated investors than us because they have access to tools that are better than ours. And that is the case. So trying to think as just an individual that you're able to predict where the market's going to go, and if it hasn't performed in a certain period of time, everybody else is a scam and the market's a scam, and of course everything is against you and the world hates you, then that's illogical and it doesn't really make any sense. You need to understand that there's a lot of factors at play here that determine where the market is moving, and if your investment thesis doesn't change and you invested for good reason, stick by it. I think that is essentially the goal, what I was getting to with this video. I know it was a lot of rambling and a very long video of me talking about things, but maybe now we can get into what's actually happening in the market and where I think the narratives are going in the next year or so. So I think one of the big things that we have, of course, is NFTs, right? And if you haven't yet, you can definitely see that the search for NFTs have just recently overtaken, of course, they've just crossed back sort of equal with the search for crypto. And I think NFTs is going to be the next big narrative as we head into the next year, because the narrative is a lot easier for the regular person to understand, right? Telling someone to invest in crypto, it seems a bit sketchy. It might be out there. People are not really understanding it just yet. But if you tell someone, oh, you can buy an asset that holds its value and appreciates over time like a real world collectible. If we think about contemplating collectible investments, you can read this on Investopedia. Very good breakdown of collectibles and why they have value. Understanding that and explaining that to the regular person, saying, okay, look, this thing, it's rare, there's only one of it in existence, wouldn't you want to own it? Of course, if other people want to own it as well, that drives up the value. Explaining crypto to somebody else and trying to explain blockchain to the average person who has no idea of our current financial system can be quite a challenge. So it's quite logical that this is what would drive the mass adoption of crypto, at least in 2022, in my opinion, and even further than that, as well as gaming. Why? Because these are things that people already understand. They understand how they work, how to use them, where the value in that ecosystem is, and it's just trying to get people to actually actively adopt those products and those projects if they want to start using this. And you can see that in Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, a lot of Asian countries, we're seeing a lot of volume in NFTs in those places because they understand collectibles. They understand value in digital goods and digital items because they are more technically advanced. I think if you've ever visited any Asian country, you'll notice that there's just screens everywhere. Everybody's talking about their digital items and their little games on their phone and stuff like that. It's insane. So it's very easy for them to adopt NFTs and move into this digital world where the digital economy and everything you own is digital. So understanding that narrative and seeing that, okay, look, everybody's talking about digital items. I can see that people are actively engaging them now. We're seeing NFTs on the news. We're seeing celebrities buy NFTs. We see celebrities using NFTs. Then perhaps that's where the narrative is shifting. And the same goes for gaming. If you see people talking about games, games are one of the biggest industries in the world. I've spoken about the stats of those in previous videos as to what sort of level gaming is at, what sort of revenue is around gaming. Esports is one of the biggest industries in the world. It just makes logical sense that capital can shift over to NFTs in gaming, because why wouldn't they? Gamers spend millions of dollars a year on digital assets that they don't own. Now, whether they have pushback against that, whether gamers don't like NFTs or not, doesn't really matter. If huge studios and the huge gaming companies start shifting over to NFTs and converting the in-game assets to NFTs without the gamer's knowledge, then we're going to see a huge influx of capital into the NFT and gaming market. And the same goes for play-to-earn and free-to-play games. Fortnite, one of the biggest games in the world, is a completely free-to-play game. And the only thing that you spend money on are in-game assets. They don't necessarily make you play the game in any of a better way. They're just spending money on assets that have aesthetic appeal to them. And that's why I think we're still in the very sort of infancy stage of gaming and NFTs, because a lot of what we have for NFTs right now are collectibles, right? People investing money in things that they believe will go up in value in the future, whereas NFTs can also have a ton of utility. And I think as over time goes by, as we start investing and using these NFTs with more utility, we'll start seeing that happening in games too, which would then, of course, drive up value of those games, of the gaming companies, of the NFTs in those games. And that's when the massive adoption of crypto will come, because since NFTs are on the blockchain and NFTs are based in crypto, that's where cryptocurrency goes in. And I don't want people to confuse NFTs with crypto. They are not the same thing. But NFTs are should be conflated or understood as collectibles. And most people can understand collectibles. They can understand why collectibles have value. And by understanding that, you can see that, sure, if everybody can understand this narrative around collectibles, of course, they will buy into NFTs. And what that does is it brings money into the cryptocurrency ecosystem. So I think we do have a ton of new games that will come out in the future. If you've played any of these games, you'll notice that some of them are pretty good, some of them suck horribly. And if you haven't yet, go ahead and play them. They're free to play. If you want to understand the narrative, instead of listening to what people are saying about these narratives in these games, as I've said earlier in the video, go and play these games. Use them for yourself. Just literally go now and play these games. Nothing's stopping you from doing that. They're completely free, and you can then determine on your own accord whether these games are valuable, whether they're investable, whether they'll appreciate in value, and if you think other people are going to be using them too. Instead of just saying, okay, the top free-to-play pay-to-earn NFT games in 2021, here's a list, of course these are the best, I'm going to buy into these. No, don't do that. Actually go and use these things, see what other people are investing in, what they're playing, and then make your decision. So with that being said, I hope this clears up how to identify the narratives in the market, or how to use those skills to figure out where the narrative is shifting. And hopefully in 2022, I will be here making videos for you guys, working on my project, working on this channel, hopefully delivering something of value that not only is just providing with information, but providing with the tools and the skills that allow you to navigate this market in an efficient and effective way. If you made it all the way to this video, please comment down below, Black Wire. As always, I shall see you in the next video. I hope you all have a wonderful new year, and then see you in 2022. Cheers.